Huh, you guys like Mario Kart, huh? Well, if you want another game just like Mario Kart, I will wholeheartedly recommend
Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne.
Ah, the Megami Tensei franchise. How I love you so. In fact, Mega 10 may just be my favorite video game franchise of all. Could you tell? Though Mega 10 is definitely best known for the Persona series, right now I want to express my passion for and try to convince you to play mainline Shin Megami Tensei. If I had to explain SMT as quickly and simply as possible, I'd say it's a monster-catching RPG like Pokemon, even though Megami Tensei predates Pokemon and likely pioneered the monster-catching subgenre, but instead of original creatures, it uses characters from mythology and religion, and instead of a lively world of childlike wonder, it's a post-apocalyptic hellscape. Sounds fun! It is. The settings and plots can differ quite greatly from entry to entry, but there's obviously some common ground. Like I said, these games deal with the apocalypse. Civilization as we know it may come to an end during the playthrough, maybe Armageddon came long before the events of the game, or perhaps the apocalypse is ongoing and the characters are desperate to stop it. Regardless of when or how the end takes place, with it comes the emergence of demons, the catch-all term Mega 10 uses for beings from mythology, religion, folklore, and legend. And especially in this dire setting, these demons can be quite threatening to the average human. So, how do you deal with them? SMT's core gameplay revolves around turn-based combat. In the modern games, your party is made up of the protagonist and 3 of your demons. The tools at your disposal are probably what you would expect. Attacks of various elements, as well as healing and support skills. In modern SMT, there's an extra element at play, the press turn system. Now stick with me on this one. These icons up here represent how many actions your party has left before it's the enemy's turn, with 4 to start with if you have a full party. Take an action, lose a press turn icon. But here's the interesting part. Hit an enemy's weakness or land a critical hit, and instead of losing the icon, it turns into a half-turn icon. Basically, 1 extra action. You can potentially turn all 4 press turn icons into half-turns, effectively doubling your turn as the turn order starts from the top if necessary. But you need to be careful while fishing for the enemy's weakness, because if your attack misses or is blocked, you'll instantly lose 2 of your icons.
Oh man!
Worse yet, if it's absorbed or reflected, perhaps the most important part of all of this is that these mechanics apply to your party and the enemy equally. So if your enemy strikes the weakness of one of your party members, they'll get an extra action. But if their attack fails, they'll lose actions. What this all feeds into is a great emphasis on preparation. It's relatively normal for your first attempt against a tough boss to merely be a test run, to see what they can do and figure out their weakness. Then, before another attempt, you can adjust your party's composition accordingly. For example, say the enemy uses electric attacks, but is weak to ice. Go into this fight with an electric weakness?
You're probably dead!
Well, make sure you have at least 1 demon that blocks electricity, and at least 1 demon that could use ice attacks.
Jack Frost.
With that, you can minimize the boss's actions and maximize your own. So how do you customize your party like this? Well, let's talk about demon negotiation and fusion. During normal encounters, you have the option to talk to a demon. By giving this demon some gifts and choosing the responses they want to hear based on their personality, you'll be able to recruit the demon to your side. While this is initially how you build up your ranks, the real depth comes with fusion. At the Cathedral of Shadows,
where demons gather,
you have the option to combine 2 or more of your demons into a brand new, often higher level demon.
strong!
The resulting demon is determined by the starting demon's race and base level. You can pass on skills during fusion, and each demon in the game specializes in different roles and types of skills based on their stats. All of this makes for a system that encourages you to experiment in order to create the perfect builds for a specific battle or your adventure in general. Speaking of which, collecting new demons isn't the only thing to do outside of combat. Whether we're talking about an entry that hones in on old school dungeon crawling, or a game with a focus on open-ended traversal, exploration is a huge part of SMT. Like any good RPG, there are items, common or rare, scattered all over the place. Especially in these games where money can prove to be scarce, I wonder why. You definitely want to seek these out. In addition to loot, NPCs can also be found around the various environments and dungeons. Some of these characters, be they human or demon, will offer side quests, with a reward of some sort waiting for you on the other end of the exchange. And the NPCs you find, whether or not they give you a side quest, can also let you in on more information about the world and story, though we'll get into that a bit later. All in all, exploring the worlds of SMT is an absolute joy, and not even just for gameplay purposes. Which brings us to... When people talk about Shin Megami Tensei, atmosphere is a word that'll come up time and time again. And for good reason. No matter the narrative context or presentation, these games have a way of completely immersing you into their setting. The desolation, isolation, and existential dread of the Vortex world. The surreal, distorted image of humanity's excess in the Schwarzwald. The stark, unsettling contrast between the optimistic, simple peace of the Eastern Kingdom of Mikado and the perpetual pain and strife of the ruined Tokyo. And I can go on, not just through the other game settings, but more specific aspects of the ones I've already mentioned. In practically any take, any combination of cyberpunk, sci-fi, fantasy, realism, surrealism, SMT never fails to suck you into the tone and mood that hangs over the characters themselves. If that sort of thing interests you, if you've been looking at the footage and listening to the music in this video and already dig the vibes, seriously, Shin Megami Tensei may be right up your alley. That being said, we should probably talk about what's arguably SMT's big, unique draw. It's Bible time! As I've mentioned a few times up to this point, the monsters of this monster-catching game are characters and creatures from mythology, religion, folklore, and legend, collectively categorized as demons. And don't let that name fool you, all sorts of beings end up as demons in SMT, from the various pantheons of ancient myth, to the creatures and cryptids of regional folktales, to the figures of contemporary religion. There's a lot. And the thing is, SMT doesn't simply use it as set dressing. These are not characters and monsters based on mythology, they are the beings from mythology. If they put Shiva in post-apocalyptic Tokyo, that is honest to God, Shiva, Hindu god of destruction, in post-apocalyptic Tokyo. While the SMT games obviously have their own lore, when it comes to the demons themselves, their lore is presumed to be one-to-one with their source material as a baseline. That being said, the creators behind Shin Megami Tensei are no strangers to referencing all sorts of sources when implementing these beings and concepts, even oftentimes blurring the line between the history surrounding religion and the religious text itself. And honestly, that's one of the most interesting parts to me. A great example of this can be found with SMT's adaptation of the Abrahamic God. Historically, Jewish and Christian people are known to have taken the deities of other cultures and reinterpreted them as demons within their own. For example, the Canaanite god Baal was twisted into Beelzebub. Within Shin Megami Tensei, this bit of religious history is often contextualized as literally casting countless other gods down into the abyss, and even outright changing some of them into, well, demonic forms. Again, I can go on and on about stuff like this. In general, as someone who has always been interested in the topic of theology, mythology, legend, and so on, I really get a kick out of Shin Megami Tensei's exploration of the subject, especially since it goes beyond the game's bestiary and into the Even though the setting and plot is drastically different from entry to entry, with most being completely self-contained worlds and stories, the narratives of the Shin Megami Tensei series do at least have enough in common to talk about broadly. Regardless of the specifics, these games usually use the demon-infested apocalypse as a platform for discussions of societal ideology, and specifically, what type of social structure would be best for humanity. This concept is explored through the eyes of an alignment system, which typically follows the structure of law, chaos, and neutral. These ideologies are exemplified through archetypical humans as well as thematically suitable demons, and by the end of each game, the player must choose a route to go down. Now, we should probably point out the elephant in the room. So many times when I see someone talking about mainline SMT, even if it's an SMT fan trying to sell someone on the series, I'll hear some variation of, well, SMT is more about gameplay than story. The story isn't really the focus. It doesn't have much of a story at all. Not only do I find this to be a bad take, I find it to be an outright incorrect one. Shin Megami Tensei is a series that tends to venture into minimalist storytelling, where the games are less likely to overtly show or tell you all the details of the setting, characters, and overall plot within cutscenes or mandatory dialogue. But that's the thing. The storytelling is minimalist, but the stories and their themes are far from it. What SMT usually does is give you all the puzzle pieces through the main story, missable NPC dialogue, the environment, the mythological source material, and even the gameplay, and it's up to you, the player, to put together the full picture. It's actually quite a lot like Dark Souls. See, this is what makes SMT the Dark Souls of JRPGs. And really, this is all to the benefit of the story in Shin Megami Tensei. At the risk of sounding very pretentious, it forces you to think in order to fully grasp all of the plot points and metaphors. It gives you a lot to think about, even after the credits roll. It leaves certain elements open to interpretation, which again makes it really enjoyable to continue to ponder, and it all goes back to contributing to the unique, mysterious vibes of these worlds. I know I keep saying some variation of this, but really, if this type of storytelling interests you, if you enjoy theorizing about narratives and exploring allusions to that end, and if you just want to experience a plot that deals with difficult ethical choices within the context of a surreal yet immersive setting, Shin Megami Tensei, folks. I can keep shouting, play Shin Megami Tensei, but that's a whole ass series, isn't it? Let me take some time to briefly recommend specific SMT games for newcomers. Let's start with the most recent mainline entry, Shin Megami Tensei 5 on the Nintendo Switch. Being so new and bringing in a bigger audience than ever before, this game naturally has plenty of features that make it very beginner friendly. There's quality of life additions like the reverse compendium search, which streamlines the process of seeing all the possible fusions available to you at any given moment, and more ways to customize the build of the protagonist and your demons through Essence, which let you easily add new skills and even resistances. Also, SMT5 strays away from the series' typical complex labyrinths to focus on open and sometimes non-linear environments, aided by surprisingly fun, fast-paced movement for a turn-based RPG. So if that structure interests you more than an old-school dungeon crawler, then check out SMT5. But before that, there was Shin Megami Tensei 4. Shocking, I know. This 3DS game is a favorite for many fans of the series, and for good reason. If you want to talk about fast pace, SMT4 really makes the press turn battle system as quick and efficient as possible, and when it comes to the monster collecting component, this game has the biggest roster of demons in the entire Mega 10 franchise, with a whopping 454 in total. Oh my... Outside of gameplay, SMT4 has a very interesting world and story, excelling at the puzzle piece approach I mentioned earlier. It also has a fairly traditional, if not extreme, take on the standard alignments. One problem with recommending this particular entry is that it's stuck on the 3DS alone, but on an unrelated note, I hear citrus fruits are good for you. Side note, make sure you don't play SMT4 Apocalypse instead. This is not an enhanced re-release, it's a direct sequel. And also it sucks. Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, my personal favorite. This game is the beginning of what I would call modern SMT, and actually introduced the press turn system I've been raving about. So while it can be a little simple compared to later entries, it's a good place to learn the basics of SMT's combat. Nocturne is the definition of minimalist storytelling, but that does not take away just how thought-provoking its narrative and themes are, and in fact it only helps. Out of all the games I'm bringing up, this one strays the most from the typical law-neutral chaos alignments, with its reasons being very different and unique beyond some superficial similarities. A big bonus with Nocturne is that it's probably the most accessible of the bunch, with its HD remaster available on all major modern platforms, except for Xbox. And on the topic of personal favorites, let's end on Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey. As you could probably tell from the lack of a number in the title, this one's a little different. This game delves far more into science fiction trappings, particularly resembling sci-fi horror, such as The Thing. The plot also masterfully uses the apocalypse and demons to tell a very intriguing and mature story about the destructive excess of humanity in a world ruled by late capitalism. I sure do love the escapism of fiction. On the gameplay side of things, Strange Journey takes a break from the usual press turn mechanics. Instead, if a party member strikes a weakness, all other party members of the same alignment join in for an automatic follow-up attack. This puts a new spin on party composition, incentivizing you to pay attention to your current alignment and adjust your lineup accordingly. Outside of mainline SMT, there's plenty of other fantastic Megami Tensei games. Some closer to what mainline is than others, but that's a story for another day. For now, I hope I convinced at least some of you to give Shin Megami Tensei a shot. I absolutely love this series, and if I can spread that love even a tiny bit, that's a win in my book. At the end of the day, you should play Shin Megami Tensei.